Ghostly tales, yet mirrors of human life. Hey everyone! Welcome to Encountering Chinese, Ghostly Tales from Zhai. Today, I'm going to tell you a story called Jiang. In Linjiang Prefecture, there was a man named Gao Fan who was remarkably intelligent from a young age. Handsome in appearance, he entered the county school at the age of 14. Wealthy families in the area vied to marry their daughters to him, but Gao Fan was very particular about choosing a wife and repeatedly went against his father's wishes. His father, Gao Zhonghong, was already 60 years old and had only this one son, so he doted on him deeply and couldn't bear to go against his wishes. At first, there was an old man named Fan from the eastern village who taught children to read at the local market. He and his family rented a house from the Gao family. Old man Fan had a daughter, nicknamed Jiang, who was the same age as Gao Fan. When they moved in, she was only 8 or 9 years old, and the two became childhood playmates, spending their days playing together. However, after the Fan family moved away, 4 or 5 years passed, and there was no further contact between the two families. One day, Gao Fan saw a young lady in a small alley. She was very beautiful, with a maid of about 6 or 7 years old following her. Gao Fan did not dare to look directly at the lady but stole glances at her. The young lady stopped and looked at Gao Fan, as if she had something to say. Gao Fan looked closely and realized that she was Jiang, which made him extremely happy. Neither spoke, but they stood staring at each other for a long time, and both developed feelings of affection for one another. Finally, Gao Fan deliberately dropped his red handkerchief on the ground and walked away. The maid picked it up, happily handed it to Jiang, who then placed it in her sleeve, pretending not to care. She then threw her own handkerchief on the ground and said to the maid, "Mr. Gao, the scholar, is no ordinary man. We can't keep what he's lost. Go return his handkerchief to him." The maid obediently ran after Gao Fan and handed him Jiang's handkerchief. Gao Fan, delighted, went home and asked his mother to propose a marriage to the Fan family. His mother replied, "The Fan family has no fixed residence and wanders from place to place. How could their daughter be worthy of you?" Gao Fan said, "This is my own choice, and I won't regret it." Madame Gao was unsure and went to discuss it with her husband, Gao Zhonghong, who also strongly opposed the idea. After Gao Fan learned of his father's attitude, he became sullen and refused to eat. Madame Gao was very worried and went to Gao Zhonghong, saying, "Although the Fan family is poor, they are not unscrupulous or shameless. I think we should visit them. If the girl is indeed worthy of our son, then even if the families are joined, it would not be harmful." Gao Zhonghong reluctantly agreed, saying, "Fine." Madame Gao then used the excuse of visiting the Black Emperor Temple to burn incense and went to the Fan family. Upon seeing Jiang's bright eyes and beautiful smile, Madame Gao was pleased. She took out money and silk to give to the Fan family and explained her purpose honestly. At first, old man Fan hesitated to agree, thinking that the Fan family's poverty made their daughter unworthy of Gao Fan. But Madame Gao's earnest attitude dispelled his concerns, and he agreed to the marriage. After returning home, Madame Gao relayed the details of the visit to her son, Gao Fan, who then shed his earlier worries and became very happy. A year later, both families chose an auspicious date to hold the wedding for the two children. After marriage, the couple lived harmoniously and happily. However, Jiang had a habit of becoming very angry and would nag incessantly in her husband's ear when upset. Gao Fan, deeply in love with Jiang, endured this silently. His parents, hearing of the situation, were displeased and privately blamed their son. Yet, Jiang overheard these complaints and became even angrier, cursing more vehemently. Gao Fan, unable to tolerate her abuse any longer, responded a bit, which only made Jiang more furious. She then drove him out and locked the door. Gao Fan, shivering outside in the cold, dared not knock but could only huddle under the eaves for the night. From then on, Jiang regarded her husband as an enemy. Initially, even after long kneeling, reconciliation was possible, but it gradually deteriorated to the point where even pleading didn't work, causing Gao Fan increasing distress. If his parents criticized Jiang even slightly, she would endlessly argue back. His parents, infuriated, pressured Gao Fan to divorce her. The Fan family, ashamed and frightened, sent a friend to plead with Gao Zhonghong for their daughter. However, Gao Zhonghong ignored the plea, and Jiang had no choice but to return to her family. After more than a year, Gao Fan encountered his father-in-law, who invited him to the Fan household and continually apologized. Then, he had Jiang dress up and come out to meet Gao Fan. Their reunion was filled with sorrow and heartache. Old Man Fan also provided food and drink to entertain his son-in-law, urging him to drink with great hospitality. In the evening, Old Man Fan insisted that Gao Fan stay overnight, preparing a bed for him and arranging for the couple to be reunited. The next morning, Gao Fan took his leave and returned home, daring not to tell his parents the true situation. Instead, he invented an excuse to cover up the truth. From then on, every few days, Gao Fan would spend a night at his father-in-law's house, and his parents remained unaware. One day, Old Man Fan came to visit Gao Zhonghong, who initially refused to see him but eventually met him out of courtesy. Old Man Fan knelt down to plead for his daughter. Gao Zhonghong, unwilling to agree but also unable to ignore the situation, said that his son did not wish to see Jiang. Old Man Fan replied, "The son-in-law stayed at my house last night. I haven't heard that he has any objections." Gao Zhonghong was shocked and asked, "When did he stay at your house?" Old Man Fan then explained everything in detail to Gao Zhonghong. Embarrassed and apologetic, Gao Zhonghong said, "I genuinely did not know about this. If he loves Jiang, why should I oppose them?" After Old Man Fan left, Gao Zhonghong summoned his son and scolded him severely. Gao Fan merely hung his head and dared not utter a word. During their conversation, Old Man Fan brought his daughter back. Gao Zhonghong said, "I still do not want to endure my daughter-in-law's temper. How about we set up separate households today? Please help us with the division. Old man Fan tried to dissuade him, but Gao Zhonghong would not listen. Thus, Gao Fan and his wife were moved to another residence, with a maid assigned to assist them. After more than a month, the two households lived peacefully, and Gao Zhonghong and his wife felt somewhat relieved. However, not long after, Jiang began to act up again. Gao Fan often had scratch marks on his face, and though Gao Zhonghong and his wife knew the cause, they chose not to intervene. One day, Gao Fan, unable to endure the beatings any longer, fled to his parents' home, looking as frantic as a bird being pursued by a predator. Gao Zhonghong and his wife were shocked and inquired about the situation when Jiang arrived with a wooden stick, dragging Gao Fan in front of them and beating him mercilessly. Despite their pleas for her to stop, Jiang ignored them and continued beating Gao Fan for dozens of blows before leaving in anger. Gao Zhonghong chased his son out, saying, "I only separated from you to avoid the quarrels between you and your spouse. You were already happy about it, so why are you running away now?" Gao Fan, expelled from his home, dared not return and could only wander aimlessly with nowhere to go. Worried that her son might be tortured to death, Gao's mother found him another house to live in and provided him with food. She also called Old Man Fan to instruct his daughter. Old Man Fan came to his daughter's room and tried to persuade her in every way, but Jiang refused to listen and instead hurled insults at her father. Old Man Fan, enraged, left in a huff, vowing never to recognize his daughter again. Soon after, Old Man Fan fell ill from his anger and, along with his wife, passed away. Jiang, bearing a grudge, did not return home to mourn but instead continued to curse at her parents from behind the wall, deliberately letting her in-laws hear. Gao Zhonghong pretended not to hear. Since Gao Fan began living alone, it felt like he had escaped from a burning pit, but he still felt desolate and lonely. He secretly bribed matchmaker Li to bring courtesans for companionship, and their meetings were always at night. Over time, Jiang caught wind of this and came to Gao Fan's residence to scold him. Gao Fan tried to defend himself vehemently, swearing by the heavens, which finally made Jiang leave. From then on, Jiang monitored Gao Fan daily, waiting to catch him in any wrongdoing. One day, the matchmaker Li came out of Gao Fan's residence and happened to run into Jiang. Jiang quickly called her over, and Li's face immediately changed. Growing more suspicious, Jiang demanded, "Confess everything you've done, and maybe I'll spare you. If you dare to hide anything, I'll pull out all your hair." Trembling, Li replied, "In the past half-month, only the courtesan Li Yunyang from the brothel has visited twice. Master Gao mentioned that he had seen the wife of the Tao family on Yusi Mountain and admired her small feet. He instructed me to find her. Although she's not a virtuous woman, she might not want to become a courtesan, so I could only try to bring her here." Since Li had spoken the truth, Jiang reluctantly forgave her. When the matchmaker Li was about to leave, Jiang forcibly stopped her. After dark, Jiang scolded the matchmaker Li, saying, "Go blow out the candles in Gao Fan's room and say that the Tao family's wife has arrived." Li did as instructed. Jiang then entered Gao Fan's bedroom. Gao Fan, thinking it was the Tao family's wife, was thrilled and took her arm, sitting together and eagerly recounting his desires and longing. Jiang remained silent. In the dark, Gao Fan touched her feet and said, "The day I saw your celestial beauty on the mountain, I could not forget these small feet." Jiang still said nothing. Gao Fan continued, "My previous wish has only now been fulfilled. How could I not have a proper meeting with you?" Saying this, Gao Fan held up the lamp to get a closer look and was horrified to discover it was Jiang. Startled, Gao Fan knelt trembling on the ground as if a knife were at his neck, and the candle fell to the floor. Jiang then dragged him by the ear back to her home, pricking his thighs with needles and making him sleep on the floor. Every morning, she would scold him. From then on, Gao Fan feared Jiang like a predator. Even when Jiang occasionally allowed him to sleep in the bed, Gao Fan was terrified and acted far from being a proper husband. Jiang grew increasingly contemptuous, slapping him and driving him from the bed, treating him as less than human. Gao Fan lived in the bedroom like a prisoner, always wary of Jiang's mood. Jiang had two older sisters, both married to scholars. The eldest was gentle and kind, not talkative, and did not get along well with Jiang. The second sister was married to the Gu family, was sly, eloquent, and fond of self-admiration. Though she was not as beautiful as Jiang, she was just as fierce and jealous. Jiang and her second sister would only talk about how they dealt with their husbands, and thus were very close. When Gao Fan visited relatives or friends, Jiang would scold him angrily. However, she did not interfere when he went to the Gu family. One day, Gao Fan was drinking at the Gu family home. After getting drunk, Gu Sheng mocked Gao Fan, saying, "Why are you so terrified of your wife?" Gao Fan, smiling, replied, "Many things in this world are incomprehensible when looked at from a different perspective. I fear my wife because she is beautiful. Interestingly, there are men whose wives are not as beautiful as mine, yet they are even more afraid of their wives. Isn't that even more puzzling?" Gu Sheng felt very embarrassed and had nothing to say in response. The maid overheard this conversation and told the second sister. The second sister, furious, grabbed a stick and went out. Seeing her coming at him with such fury, Gao Fan, without having time to put on his shoes, tried to flee. The second sister struck him on the spine with the stick, and after 3 blows, Gao Fan fell and couldn't get up. In the end, she accidentally hit his head, causing a severe head wound with blood flowing profusely. After beating Gao Fan, the second sister returned to the inner courtyard, while Gao Fan, staggering, went home. Jiang was shocked and asked him what had happened. At first, Gao Fan hesitated to speak because he was afraid of offending the second sister, but under Jiang's repeated questioning, he eventually told her everything. Jiang wrapped Gao Fan's head in cloth and angrily said, "How could someone else's husband be troubled by her to the point of getting beaten?" She then changed into a short-sleeved outfit, took a wooden club, and went straight to the Gu family home with a maid. Jiang arrived at the Gu family and was greeted with a smile by the second sister, but without saying a word, Jiang began to beat her with the club. The second sister was knocked to the ground, and Jiang continued to beat her, tearing her trousers and hitting her severely until her teeth fell out and she soiled herself. After Jiang returned, the second sister was both embarrassed and angry, and she sent her husband Gu Sheng to complain to Gao Fan. Gao Fan immediately came out and tried to comfort and reassure Gu Sheng with kind words. Gu Sheng privately told Gao Fan, "I had no choice but to come. My wife has done too many evil deeds, and it's fortunate that someone else could punish her. There is no animosity between us men." However, Jiang overheard this conversation. She immediately came out, pointed at Gu Sheng, and scolded, "You despicable man! Your wife suffers, and you secretly get along with outsiders. Shouldn't such a man be beaten to death?" She then shouted for a stick. Gu Sheng, extremely embarrassed, fled the scene. From then on, no one in the vicinity was willing to associate with Gao Fan. One year, Gao Fan's old classmate, Wang Zia, came to visit. Gao Fan invited him to drink. During their drinking session, they joked about affairs in the inner quarters, with the jokes becoming quite vulgar. Jiang happened to be hiding nearby, listening to their conversation. She secretly put croton seed into the soup and had a maid bring it in. Shortly after, Wang Zia began to suffer severe vomiting and diarrhea, and eventually, he was on the brink of collapse. Jiang had the maid ask him, "Do you still dare to be so disrespectful?" Wang Zia then realized why he was suffering and pleaded for help. Only then did Jiang give him a remedy to stop the diarrhea. From then on, classmates warned each other, and no one dared to visit the Gao family for drinks anymore. Wang Zia had a tavern where he had decorated with many red plums, and he hosted a banquet to entertain his peers. Gao Fan deceived Jiang, saying he was going to a literary society meeting, and left the house. In the evening, as everyone was drinking merrily, Wang Zia announced, "There is a famous courtesan from Nanchang staying here. I can have her join us for drinks." The guests were delighted. Only Gao Fan stood up to leave, but the others stopped him, saying, "Although your wife has sharp ears and eyes, she cannot hear or see what's happening here." So everyone swore to keep the matter secret, and Gao Fan reluctantly sat back down. Soon enough, the courtesan arrived, a young woman of 17 or 18, adorned with jingling jade ornaments and a high, cloud-like hairstyle. When asked her name, she replied, "My surname is Xia, and my given name is Fang Lan." Fang Lan spoke with great charm and elegance, and the entire room was ecstatic. However, Fang Lan seemed particularly interested in Gao Fan, frequently sending him meaningful glances. The guests noticed this and deliberately pulled the two of them together to sit side by side. Fang Lan secretly took Gao Fan's hand and wrote the character, "Stay," on his palm with her finger. Gao Fan was conflicted, wanting to leave but not willing to, and wanting to stay but feeling afraid, leaving him in a state of indecision. The two of them whispered closely together, their intoxicated behavior becoming increasingly unruly, and Gao Fan forgot all about the rouge tiger at home. After a while, as the night grew late and the number of patrons in the tavern dwindled, a young and handsome boy sat alone in a distant corner, drinking by candlelight, with a young servant holding a handkerchief standing beside him. The guests whispered about the young man's elegance. Soon, after finishing his drink, the young man left. The young servant returned and told Gao Fan, "The master outside is waiting for you and has something to say." The guests were puzzled, but Gao Fan's face turned pale. He hurriedly left without saying goodbye. The young man was indeed Cheng, and the servant was one of the family's maids. Later, Gao Fan followed Cheng back home and, of course, received another beating. From then on, Cheng's confinement of Gao Fan became even stricter, and all social interactions, including celebratory and mourning activities with friends and relatives, were cut off. When the academic examiner came to inspect the county school, Gao Fan was dismissed from his official title due to incorrect explanations of the exam questions. One day, while Gao Fan was talking with a maid, Cheng suspected an affair between them and hit the maid on the head with a wine jar. After the beating, Cheng bound both Gao Fan and the maid, cut a piece of flesh from each of their abdomens with embroidery scissors, and then exchanged the pieces, attaching each to the other's wound. Then they were released and left to tend to their own wounds. After more than a month, the flesh that had been attached to the wounds actually grew back. Cheng frequently stepped on bread with her bare feet, then ordered Gao Fan to pick it up and eat it. Such incidents were very common. Gao Fan's mother, missing her son, visited his home and saw that he had become emaciated. She returned home in great distress, almost wishing for death. That night, she dreamt of an old man who told her, "Do not grieve, all this is the result of past karma. In the previous life, Cheng was a mouse raised by the monk Jiang, and your son was a scholar. Once, he visited Jiang's residence and accidentally killed that mouse. This is the cause of the current suffering, which cannot be changed by human effort. However, if you rise early every day and sincerely recite the Avalokiteshvara mantra 100 times, it might be effective." Lady Gao shared the dream with her husband, and both were puzzled. Following the advice from the dream, the couple diligently recited the scripture every day. After more than 2 months, Cheng remained as domineering as ever, with her behavior becoming increasingly reckless. However, whenever she heard drums or gongs from outside, she would rush out without finishing her makeup, foolishly gazing around, ignoring the stares and pointing of passers-by. Despite their embarrassment, Gao Zhonghong and his wife could not stop her. One day, an old monk began to preach about karma and cause and effect outside Gao Fan's house, drawing a crowd so large it was like a wall. The sound of the monk's drum was reminiscent of a cow's lowing. Cheng heard the noise and rushed outside. Seeing the crowd was so dense that there was no space, she had a maid bring a stool and stood on it to get a better view. The crowd's attention immediately focused on her, but Cheng seemed completely unaware. As the monk's sermon was nearing its end, he took a bowl of clean water and loudly addressed Cheng, saying, "Do not be angry, do not be angry." The past life is not false, and this life is not real. Let the mouse hide, so that the cat does not find it. After finishing his sermon, the monk took a sip of water and splashed it onto Jiang's face. The water mixed with her makeup, causing it to run down her face and dampen her clothes. The crowd was astonished, expecting Jiang to react with fury. However, she said nothing, simply wiped her face, and went home alone. Afterward, the old monk also left. Jiang returned home and sat dazedly in her room, seemingly lost and not eating all day, simply tidying up her bedding before going to sleep. In the middle of the night, Jiang suddenly woke Gao Fan. He assumed she needed to use the chamber pot and brought it to her. However, Jiang pushed the pot aside, secretly pulled Gao Fan's arm, and dragged him into her bed. Gao Fan, trembling with fear as if receiving an imperial decree, complied and got into bed. Jiang looked at him with a sigh and said, "It is truly my fault for making you this way." She then began to caress his body, crying every time she touched a scar from the beatings, scratching herself with her nails, and feeling deeply distressed, even contemplating suicide. Seeing his wife in such a state, Gao Fan was heartbroken and continuously tried to comfort her. Jiang said, "The old monk I saw today must have been a manifestation of a bodhisattva. He woke me up with the water he threw, and all my resentment has vanished. Now, as I think back on my past actions, it feels like it wasn't even me. I feel immense guilt for not enjoying life with such a good husband and for not treating my good in-laws well. What have I done? Tomorrow, we should move back home and live with my in-laws. That way, I can take proper care of them." Jiang continued to murmur throughout the night, as if she had not seen her husband in 10 years. At dawn, Jiang got up, folded clothes, and packed up her belongings. The maid carried the boxes while Jiang herself carried the bedding. She urged Gao Fan to go knock on his parents' door. Gao Fan's mother was surprised and asked about their sudden visit. Gao Fan explained Jiang's intentions to her. While Gao's mother was still hesitant, Jiang and the maid had already entered the hall. Gao's mother followed them in. Jiang lay on the ground, crying and pleading for Gao's mother to forgive her past transgressions. Seeing Jiang's sincere remorse, Gao's mother cried and said, "My daughter-in-law, how have you suddenly changed like this?" Gao Fan then detailed the events of Jiang's encounter with the monk, and his mother realized that her previous dream had been true. The elder couple from the Gao family was naturally overjoyed and instructed their servants to clean and prepare the old residence for their son and daughter-in-law. From that day on, Jiang treated her in-laws with utmost respect and care, even surpassing the devotion of a typical dutiful child. She became as shy as a bride in the presence of outsiders and would blush deeply if her past was brought up in jest. Furthermore, she was frugal and skilled in managing the household, and within 3 years, despite Gao's parents not involving themselves in household affairs, the Gao family had become very wealthy. Gao Fan also achieved the degree of a scholar within that year. Jiang often reminded Gao Fan, "Even now, I still remember how you liked Fang Lan." Gao Fan, now free from his wife's mistreatment, was content and did not dare to indulge in any more fantasies, responding vaguely to Jiang's comments. When Gao Fan went to the capital for the imperial examinations and returned home after several months, he was surprised to find Fanglan playing chess with Jiang. Gao Fan was astonished and asked Jiang what was going on. It turned out that while Gao Fan was away, Jiang had spent several hundred taels of silver to redeem Fanglan from her former profession. This story has several versions, but only Wang Zia from Zhejiang provided the most detailed account. At the end of the story, the author included a commentary. Whether a person accumulates virtue or commits evil, every deed has its repercussions. When such karma occurs between husband and wife, it is like a wound on the bone, with particularly severe suffering. Out of many couples I have seen, only about 1 in 10 has a virtuous wife, while the proportion of shrewish wives can be as high as 9 out of 10. This also reveals that there are far fewer virtuous people in the world than those who commit evil. The divine powers of gods and Buddhas are boundless. I sincerely hope they can truly cleanse this vast world with pure water. Alright. That's all for today's ghostly tale, Jiang. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. Please also encourage everyone to comment and share more. We'll see you in the next episode.